Welcome to Wrapped Up Wednesday.
What is going on, YT? It is your boy Diego, but as always, you can call me Chancho, and I'm here as always with my co-host Ashley. Say hi to the people.
Hi, guys.
And we are finally back. Welcome to episode 7 of our true crime series called Wrapped Up. And I know we've been gone for a few Wednesdays, guys, but it's been really busy, but we're finally back and we have a new story. So today's story was actually suggested by one of our subscribers named Anaí. Wherever you may be, thank you so much for the suggestion for today's story. And today's story is very, very unsettling, and it's going to really make you question the friendships that you hold and how much you can really trust a person. It's actually pretty interesting because when I was in high school, one of my closest friends, he would always say, Diego, one of my biggest fears is that one day one of you guys is just going to kill me. And it was always really crazy to say, and low-key when he would say it, we would always just kind of laugh it off like it was kind of a joke. But he was like, no, think about it, because you wouldn't expect your own friends to be the ones to just kill you for no reason.
That's true.
And today's story is a very tragic tale of of one of these crazy cases that happened. So the story for today is on the Scream Killers. If you're new to the channel, then welcome to the only show on the internet where the name of the show describes the stories that we talk about because we know who the killers are, but it also describes your co-host as we're wrapped up in blankets. And we also invite you to subscribe to the channel because we try to have a new story for you guys every Wednesday.
Also on Wrapped Up, we have a snack and we like to change it up every week just to keep it fresh for you guys. For this week, we have selected goldfish because you can never go wrong with goldfish, and mineral water.
Interestingly, we are going to recommend this
brand
from H-E-B. Yes. It's a Texas thing, but if you guys have access to these, you should try them out.
Not only do we like to snack on Chewy Chips Ahoy and iced cold coffee, but we also like to snack on goldfish and for our beverage of choice, mineral water.
So once again, thank you guys for tuning into the channel. If you're interested in true crime like Ashley and I are, then we invite you to leave a like, leave a comment. And if you have any suggestions like Anaí did, then we'll consider your suggestions.
Yes.
To talk about on the channel. And Ashley, do you have today's disclaimer, please?
I do. Warning. The following contains description of crime scenes and other materials that some may find disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised. We also want to say that we mean no disrespect to the victims or the families involved.
And so without wasting any more of you guys' time, let's go ahead and get straight into today's story. Okay everyone, so we're going to go ahead and get started by giving a little bit of background information on both the victim and the killers. So Cassie Jo Stoddart was born on December 21st, 1989, so at the time of the murder, she would have only been 16 years old. Cassie grew up in Pocatello, Idaho, with her parents, her older sister, and her younger brother. Now, we don't have too much information on Cassie, but what we do know is that she was known to her family and her friends as a very responsible and a very good straight-A student, and she had really high aspirations that one day she would become a lawyer. So Cassie attended Pocatello High School with her then boyfriend Matt Beckham and her classmates/friends Brian Draper and Tori Adamczyk. So now we're going to go ahead and shift over to one of the murderers' backstories. So Brian Lee Draper was born on March 21st, 1990, whereas his accomplice, Tori Michael Adamczyk, was born on June 14th, 1990. Now, these two met each other when they were in high school, and because they were both super into films and movies, that kind of stuff, they quickly became best friends, and they bonded in that sort of way. So Brian and Tori both had this strange fascination with that really old movie, or I guess wouldn't have been old at this time, but with the movie Scream, and they thought that it would be a good idea, according to them, to recreate this film and what happens in that movie in real life. Now, if you guys don't know what happens in Scream, it's a bunch of high school kids, and I believe it's two of them that dress up in that mask that everybody knows from Halloween, and they went around and killed basically everybody. So it's a pretty sick movie to kind of want to emulate in real life.
And it came out in 1996, for those of you wondering.
Yes. So at the start of their junior year, which was in September 2006, Brian and Tori then began making what they called a death list, and they started to pick certain classmates that they put on this death list And they wanted to, again, guys, this is pretty sick, but they wanted to document their killings. They had already pre-decided people that they wanted to kill. And just like in the movie Scream, they were trying to emulate that. And at the top of their so-called death list that they, these list of people that they just chose to kill was their friend Cassie. Now, on September 21st, which was just one day before the murder, Brian and Tori then began to film themselves when they were plotting Cassie's murder. We're gonna link the videos in the description so you guys can check those out.
Yeah, they're on YouTube.
They're on YouTube, and they're very, very disturbing because they're almost talking about it in a sort of like joking
Playful
matter, like if it's something funny or if it's something that isn't like a big deal. They're not even thinking about the consequences of what they're doing. They're just making it seem like, oh guys, we're so cool, this is so funny, we're gonna commit murder.
It's like vlogging before vlogging became a thing.
Right. So it's pretty disturbing, but we'll link those videos below. So according to the Parkman magazine, Brian then began recording by saying, "We have found our victim, and sad as it may be, she's our friend, but you know what? We all have to make sacrifices. Our first victim is going to be Cassie Stoddart." So as if it wasn't enough, like he's pre-filming it and he's already telling everybody, the whole world, letting them know that he's already picked his first victim. They've already picked their first victim and named her by name. And it says, and he goes on to say, "She's gonna be alone in a big dark house out in the middle of nowhere. How perfect can you get?" And again, they're saying it in a very playful manner, as if it's a joke sort of thing. So Brian and Tori knew that Cassie was going to be house sitting for her aunt and uncle, and they hoped that she was gonna invite a bunch of people over, kind of have a house party sort of thing with no adult supervision.
Right.
So they figured, oh, well, this is a perfect time for us to commit the murder that we want to do because we're going to have her in a secluded location, no adult supervision. And so Brian and Tori thought that they were going to have a lot of people over, have a party, and they wanted to kill everyone there. They said that they suggested that they kill everyone in the house one by one, but then Tori responds with, "Why one by one? Why can't it just be a slaughterhouse?" So Brian responded back and he said, "We're gonna go down in history. We're gonna be just like Scream." And so that lets you know like the state of mind that these guys were in. They had already made their decision, they chose their target, and nothing was gonna stop them from committing what they did. And that leads us straight into the murder.
On September 22nd, 2006, Cassie, then 16, was asked to house sit and take care of 3 cats and 2 dogs for her aunt and uncle who were leaving town that weekend. Cassie had informed her boyfriend at the time, Matt Beckham, that she was going to house sit for the weekend. And for some reason, Matt decided to share this information with their fellow friends, Brian and Tori, if you can remember from chapter 2. And later on that day, around 6 p.m., that's when Matt showed up at the house to hang out with Cassie. And prior to him showing up, Cassie had asked for permission from her aunt and uncle if her boyfriend could come over because she didn't want to be alone, and rightfully so. I mean, she was in a area in Pocatello, Idaho. At the time, there was people around the neighborhood, but it wasn't super populated, so she just wanted to have somebody there with her. And her aunt and uncle decided to give her permission because, once again, Cassie was a straight A student. She was very loyal, and they knew that she wasn't going to do anything devious, so they were just like, yeah, why not? We trust you and your boyfriend to not have a party, so they can come over. So when Matt shows up at 6 p.m., she's super happy, super excited. But then shortly after, she sees that her friends Brian and Tori show up, and Cassie is not too happy about this whatsoever, because again, she had only asked for Matt to be there, and for her friends to show up, it was kind of like a, dang, if my family finds out that I had 2 friends here, they're gonna think that I threw a party, and that wasn't the case at all. And then Matt basically just tells her hey, my bad, it's on me. And she was just kind of well, I mean, they're already here. I can't be a bad host and just be get out of here. So she decides to take them in. And since they're already there, she's might as well do a house tour. So she basically leads them through the entire house, just pretty much showing them the rooms and stuff like that. And eventually she leads them to the basement. And while in the basement, that is when Brian decides to unlock one of the doors, unbeknownst to Cassie, right? Because she's too busy in host mode to notice that Brian had unlocked the basement door. the four friends then decide to go back to the living room and start watching a film, which if you guys have seen it before, it was Kill Bill Volume 2. So they're watching the film, and then halfway through, Brian and Tori then tell Matt and Cassie that they were going to just leave and go to the movie theaters to watch a movie. At this point, they were just kind of using an excuse to just get out of there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Would you say?
I would say so, yeah.
So they pretty much leave the house, they say their goodbyes and they drive off. So Cassie and Matt are in the house, they're continuing to watch the film, and then a couple minutes go by, and that's when Brian and Tori decide to kind of like loop around and drive back to the neighborhood. But instead of driving or like parking in front of the house, they decide to park on the side of like the sidewalk, the road, kind of like not in front of the house. And they open their doors, they get out. And this is the crazy part. So when they get out, they go to the trunk, they open the trunk, and in the back of the trunk, they have costumes. And you're probably wondering, like, costumes? Like, what's going on? Well, remember in chapter 1, they were fascinated with the movie Scream. In the back of the trunk, they had not replicas, but like copycats of the costumes. So they had dark clothing, they had gloves, and they even had white masks, which we're going to show you on the screen right now. So the boys then put on the clothing, and then they walk up to the house. And if you can remember, Brian had unlocked the door from the basement. So that is the door that the boys use to access the house. So at this time, they're in the basement, and that is when they start making loud noises in an attempt to get Cassie and Matt's attention, moving like chairs and tables and like banging things on the wall. Not necessarily making loud noises from their voices, because that would be a little bit too like obvious. So they were just trying to do like other loud noises to get them down to the basement. However, all those were unsuccessful because Matt and Cassie did not go down to the basement whatsoever, which then led Brian and Tori to eventually mess with the circuit breaker that was in the basement. So they decide to turn off the lights, and naturally Cassie and Matt were like, what's going on? But once again, they did not go down to the basement to kind of like mess with a circuit breaker. So once that attempt of the power being cut off at the house was unsuccessful, that's when Brian and Tori decided to turn the lights back on. And at this point, like, too many crazy things are happening in the house, and Cassie is obviously scared, and I would be too. And at the same time, Matt notices that one of the dogs in the house started barking at the basement stairs and was just basically like growling, and like the dog was not happy whatsoever. And Matt obviously was like, okay, something's going on. Something's like really weird. So he decides to call his mom and ask for permission to spend the night, being the good boyfriend. He notices that his girlfriend is scared and he just wants to stay there and protect her. But when he calls his mom tells him that no, he can't spend the night. But if Cassie would like, she's more than welcome to come over and spend the night. But Cassie, she's a woman of her word. If she told her aunt and uncle that she was going to house sit and take care of the animals, then that's exactly what she was going to do. And so around 10:30 p.m., that is when Matt's mother comes and picks him up, and Cassie is left alone. Once again, Brian and Tori take this opportunity to kind of like mess with her. But while Matt is leaving the house, he decides to call Tori. So basically he calls up Tori, and Tori answers. And remember, he's in the basement. So when he answers, he's whispering. And Matt takes this as an indication that he's still at the movie theaters watching the movies. So they don't end up hanging out. So they hang up, and again, Brian and Tori decide to take this opportunity to mess with Cassie. So that's when they start messing with the circuit breaker once again, and they turn off the lights. But once again, Cassie does not go down to the basement. And of course, Brian and Tori grow very impatient at this time, and they decide to basically climb up the basement stairs and enter the living room, where they see that Cassie is lying down on the couch. In one last final attempt to get her attention, this is where Tori proceeds to open a closet door and slam the basement in hopes to get a reaction from her, but they don't, because Cassie was actually asleep on the couch. So at this time, Brian is armed with a dagger-type weapon, and Tori is armed with a hunting knife. And this is what the two boys used to brutally attack Cassie while she was asleep on the couch. The boys ended up brutally stabbing her 30 times, with 12 of those being fatal. The boys then ran from the home, and they were just like screaming, I don't know, maybe like on an adrenaline high, and they returned to their car, and the boys then began filming their reaction with their camcorder. And this is basically what the confession or recording was. So it starts off with Brian saying, "We just left her house. This isn't a bleeping joke." Tori then responds, "I'm shaking," which then Brian responds, "I stabbed her in the throat. I saw her lifeless body. It just disappeared. Dude, I just killed Cassie." And then Tori ends it with saying, "Shut the bleep up. We've got to get our story. We've got to get our act straight." And that leads us into chapter 3.
So the next day, on September 23rd, 2006, Matt and Tori then hang out. Matt tries calling Cassie several times that day, but she's not picking up. So the next day, September 24th, 2006, Cassie's body was then uncovered by her relatives who came back home, the relatives that she was house sitting for. So police note that Cassie's body was covered all over in blood and had a lot of deep lacerations and a lot of stab wounds. And the police also noted that at the house there didn't seem to be any forced entry, or nothing seemed to be stolen from the home, so they started ruling out breaking and entering, robbery gone wrong, that kind of stuff. So the police then start to suspect that whoever did kill Cassie must have known her or must have been in the house with her. So the police then begin the investigation of the murder of Cassie, and they start off with Matt, her boyfriend, who was the last person that was seen with Cassie. Matt then explains to the police that while he was there was a bunch of weird stuff that was happening. So then Matt informs the police that Brian and Tori were also last seen with Cassie. They were both there that night, the last time that he was with her. So initially, Brian and Tori tell the police that obviously they're pretending, but they pretend to be shocked to hear that their friend Cassie was murdered. And they tell the police that they don't know anybody who would want to hurt or anybody who would want to do something like this to their friend. So then the police then begin to interview both Brian and Tori about the murder. And Brian and Tori both stick to their story. "Oh, we weren't there. We went to the movies because we wanted to watch the movie called Pulse." However, neither of the boys could tell the police what the movie was about, or they couldn't even show the police proof that they were there by showing them their ticket stubs. So it's already starting to look a little suspicious for them. After the police then start to put some pressure on the guys, Brian then begins to break. He was the first one to break. He informs the police that, and this is again very sickening to think that he considers it this, but he explains to the police that what they did to Cassie was supposed to be a joke. And during their interrogations, both boys then began to blame each other. So even though they initially looked like they were, in the same mindset, they started to come against one another.
Yeah, so basically Brian informs police that he was shocked that Tori was the one that stabbed Cassie. He informs police that he was in the same room as Tori, but that his knife never touched Cassie, and that he never stabbed Cassie, that it was basically all Tori. And then he later kind of backtracks and say, "Never mind, I did end up stabbing Cassie, but it was only after Tori told me to." And it was, if you see the video footage of YouTube, you can kind of tell where Tori is like the ringleader of it, because he'll say something and then Brian will kind of go along with it or agree. So when he tells police that he stabbed Cassie because Tori told him to, kind of makes sense if you watch the video on YouTube. Brian then later leads the police to the Black Rock Canyon, and that is where both boys decided to discard the knives, the masks, the camera, the footage that they had recorded of themselves, and then they even disposed of the clothing that they wore the night of the murder. Brian even tells the police that at one point they tried to burn the camera because they realized that they had video recorded themselves, like basically committing to the murder. So they tried burning it, but luckily the FBI and the forensic people were able to recover the video footage, and that's where they were able to see basically the whole confessional of both boys. On September 27, 2006, Brian and Tori were both arrested and charged with first-degree murder, as well as conspiracy to commit first-degree murder. Of course, during the trial, Brian stated that he was inspired by the Columbine High School killers, Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold. I believe that's how you say it. And if you guys can remember, this was a very massive high school shooting that happened in early 2000s, and I don't want to say it sparked a lot of like copycats, but it kind of did. And this is kind of evidence because Brian basically kind of like idolized these two boys. Tori said that he was inspired by the Scream movies, and if you can also recall from chapter 1, both boys were fascinated with these movies about two masked killers just going around killing classmates or people that they knew. Brian was convicted on April 17, 2007, and Tori was convicted on June 8, 2007. On August 21st, 2007, since both boys were convicted of first-degree murder on their separate trials, they were given the mandatory life sentence without the possibility of parole and 30 years to life for being convicted of conspiracy to commit murder. And that is the story of the Scream killers.
So, yeah, this is just really, really unsettling, going back to what I said in the beginning, because you just never suspect your own friends to even consider doing something like this to you for no reason whatsoever. And that day, Cassie was just going about her business. It was just going to be a regular house sitting night for her, but because these guys were kind of like sickly, twisted, inspired by people that they have no business being inspired by, they committed a senseless murder. And it's just very, very crazy to think that, again, it's your own friends and you wouldn't even suspect it. Going back to what my friend said, that's one of his biggest fears, and after reading today's story, it's pretty chilling to hear about it.
Right, and going based off what you were saying, it was just a regular, typical school day for Cassie, and it's crazy to think that they were filming her the morning of, the afternoon of, and even like the almost to the evening of her murder. And they were doing it so nonchalant about it. Like, they just, if you see the video on YouTube, they go up to her and they're just like, "Hey Cassie, like, how are you?" And she's laughing, she's having a great time, In her head, she's thinking, "Oh, I'm gonna go house sit for my aunt and uncle, make a couple bucks, hang out with my boyfriend," and that's that. And the fact that these two boys took her life away from her, and the possibility of her being a lawyer and doing so many great things in her life is just sickening. And going based off of what your friend says, like, you put so much trust in your friends, and then they can be the quickest one to either backstab you or unfortunately take your life, and that's really sad too.
Right.
Witness.
And if you guys watch their tapes, they're all over YouTube, but again, we'll link those. Mm-hmm. They're very, very just chilling to watch, because that conversation they have after they kill her is very, very crazy and just scary, because they're like laughing about it. Like, it's just so disturbing for any sane-minded person to watch that and like not get chills thinking about what they just did, and then they're taking it like it's like the funniest thing to them. So it's very, very disturbing to watch.
And even in the video, I think Brian is the one that says, "Oh my gosh, that happened so fast." Mm-hmm. Like,
it's like, it's just messed up.
And of course, if you watch the video, there was actually more people on the list who were next.
Right.
I can't even imagine what like the second person on the list was thinking when that list was exposed. I don't think I found evidence of the death list. I don't even know if they've published that, but I know for like the victims that were on the list, I know they were informed that they were up next.
So that wraps up today's story. It was a very disturbing one. I mean, they're all disturbing cases. Once again, we want to thank you, Anaí, for submitting or letting us know about this story. We had heard about it before, but after your suggestion, we
did more of a deep dive
into it and looked into it. And again, if you guys have any more stories you want us to talk about, our next story that we have for Wrapped Up Wednesdays was also submitted to us by a subscriber, and we'll shout you out in the next episode. And once again, thank you guys for tuning in to today's story, and we'll catch you guys on next Wednesday's Wrapped Up, and we'll see you guys later.
Bye.